Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. A couple of days back, a bit of news broke, and I would say that was a very welcome piece of news for most of us, which was that the Atlântico will be changed in the next update. So today I'll be talking about that a little bit. I can't obviously show yet what's going or what the impact of that is because the update isn't out yet. But given the, how am I going to put it, rather heated reactions that this seems to have triggered, I figured I'll give you a bit of my view on these things. Now, before we get into this, I feel that probably a couple of disclaimers are in order, because again, dipping into a heated conversation here. I am not a lawyer, as might come to a surprise to some of you, but probably not to most. So nothing that I say in this video has any kind of legal foundation or should be considered legal advice in any shape or form whatsoever. I also don't work for Wargaming. Now, I am a community contributor, which means that I do have certain communication channels with Wargaming, but I don't get paid by them, and I also don't get told what to do or what to say by Wargaming. So the things that I'm saying are my personal opinion. And with that out of the way, let's get into the whole thing. Now, if you have been living under a rock or just literally never played Tier 8 for the last year or 6 months or however long it's been, I'll give you a brief history of this whole thing. So this here, as you can see, is the Atlântico, a Tier 8 premium Brazilian battleship of World War I vintage. This ship has been released, I would have to look up when, but it's been a couple of months, has been released with a Blitz Pass, which means that that was actually a relatively affordable Tier 8 premium, because usually Tier 8 premiums are not on the cheap side, so coming out with the Blitz Pass, however that much that was in your respective currency, was a bargain. Even more so because the Atlântico, as she was released, was completely broken. Well, she wasn't completely broken, but she was overpowered as released. Now, when I did the review, I had a look at the CIC numbers, did a couple of test games, and figured, yeah, it's a powerful ship, but the deck armor seemed to be, on the weak side. So I figured, okay, low hit point pool, weak deck armor, that's probably the balancing factor for that thing. Well, it turned out the CIC data was corrected shortly after, and the deck armor was pinned at 150mm, which is ridiculous. So this thing was basically having tier 10 armor plating in tier 8, which means that most of the large caliber armor piercing shells would more or less bounce off it, which wasn't particularly helpful if you were in a battleship. To add insult to injury, if we have a very brief look, so first of all, obviously citadel protection of 20% and damage reduction of 18% in tier 8 is quite ridiculous. These are, I think, equivalent almost to the Freddy's value at tier 9, and that's a German battleship. The Atlântico has 10 main guns with a 23-second reload. The main guns can't fire high explosive. The AP is okay. They are 381mm, British design. The fun part comes when we start looking at the secondaries, because she has got 234mm secondaries. This thing's basically got a Cheshire strap to each side of it. And these things have a 9.5 kilometer range. I mean, this is with the historical camo, but still, they are very precise as well. Plus, she gets single-mounted 127mm secondaries, auto secondaries, so sort of American refits of some description, and these things got an almost 8 kilometer range. You get five on each side. That makes this ship the surface detection of 8.8 kilometers isn't helping either. This makes this ship a ridiculously powerful secondary monster in tier 8. That by itself wouldn't make the ship overpowered. What has made the ship overpowered, and what has effectively broken the tier 8 meta to some degree here, is the combination of these ridiculous secondaries and an almost impenetrable armor for large caliber battleship shells at tier 8. Which means that you could effectively park your Atlântico somewhere and, just, shoot things with some measure of impunity. Now, you can totally sink the Atlântico, right? You could torpedo the thing. You could just burn it down like everything else. She's got a relatively low hit point pool with 46,000, and this is fully upgraded. This is a premium. So, burns like everything else. Carriers can't strike it like everything else. The only people who really had issues with it were battleship players who were firing large caliber armor-piercing shells and found that they don't do an awful lot. And obviously people who hadn't understood that you shouldn't damage control single fires. Now, she's also not, obviously, completely helpless against things like destroyers, because 234mm secondaries doing 670 points of HE damage and a 8% fire chance. This thing would burn down a lot of things. The secondaries are quite devastating against destroyers, and, the armor made it such that it was relatively easy to rack up large amounts of damage if you weren't a complete noob to these things and were comfortable playing a battleship in tier 8. This has annoyed an awful lot of people, myself included, mostly for one reason, because this was historically a World War I battleship. Well, this never really existed, but the design that it's based on was. These things should be either well armored or quick, but not both of them. And I mean, nobody's accusing this thing of being quick, but it's doing almost 24 and a half knots. And the armor is frankly ridiculous. So unless this is a, late 40s refit, which has all the engines replaced and has been up-armored up the wazoo, this shouldn't even be working this way. And yes, obviously, this being overpowered just because of its broken setup, a combination of features, doesn't make me particularly happy either. Now, I've put a video out and say you can totally sink this thing, right? It's not that you can't, but I do accept that it is a difficult ship to play against. All right, so that was the history bit. Now, the week, I think it was last week, Wargaming announced that there are going to be changes made to the Atlântico, and that has got people in uproar. At least some of them, presumably the people who have paid money for the Atlântico, and are now seeing a change to this ship. Right, so before we go any further, I'm going to have to get a little philosophical. So the first question we obviously have to ask ourselves, what is a premium ship? You'd say, well, Terry, it's pretty obvious what a premium ship is. Actually, it isn't. So maybe I'm just old. But let me give you a brief idea of what I think of digital goods. Now, I grew up in a time, long ago, when digital goods weren't a thing. So if you were buying, let's say, a book, then you owned a physical copy of that book. And or if you like me were purchasing purchasing Wing Commander 1, which came out on I don't know how many, but I think it's more than 10 floppy disks. And you had a box with it, right? It was then yours. You took it home from the store, you installed it on your computer on MS-DOS, and yes, you owned that then. You could do whatever you wanted with it. You could throw it in a fire. You could give it to your friends for their birthday. You could, you could do whatever you want with it. You were the owner of this property. You paid money, you got it, you owned it. Digital goods don't often work that way. Now, before we go into the bit that triggered me to make the disclaimer of saying that I'm not a lawyer and there's no legal advice in here, let's have a very brief look at the current bundle offers. Now, this is in Australian dollars, so you do need to convert that to your own respective currency or just look it up. But just as it so happens, there is a Roma bundle. The Roma is a tier 8 premium battleship, which is a very powerful Tier 8 premium battleship. It is apparently 21% off, which I'm not sure where that 21% comes from, because you can't be seen to buy these. Anyway, completely different topic. Let's not go there. But it costs $85, right? So how much? I think like a premium Blitz pass, and we can just literally look at this one and see how much it would cost. So the regular Blitz pass, which would have been the thing where the Atlântico would have been in, and not the premium bundle thing, which gets you all the other goodies, probably contained the historical camera or something. But if you just bought the regular one, you would have paid probably a quarter of what you would normally pay in a bundle for a tier premium. So bargain, right? Now let's take a look at well, actually, before we do that, so my understanding of a premium ship is that I would see this as sort of like a DLC, right? So I can play the game for free, and I can use a lot of features of the game for free, but there are some features or some aspects of the game that are locked. So to me, this is similar to let's say if I spend, I don't know, $20-30 to buy a DLC on Hearts of Iron 4. New bits of the game get unlocked that I can then play that I didn't have access before. That doesn't mean that I, strictly speaking, own the DLC in the same way that I would say own a book, or my very old copy of Wing Commander 1, which unfortunately I no longer have, but pretty sure the floppy's be dead by now. But it's part of a game, right? Now, a big difference between Hearts of Iron 4 and World of Warships Blitz is that Hearts of Iron 4 is a game that I have installed on my computer using Steam. I'm not sure what the implications of that are, but if I switch off the internet and just want to play Hearts of Iron 4, I can do that. It is on my computer. I probably can't give it to a friend because I don't own any physical bits. I probably also can't trade it in, going to a shop saying, I'm done playing this one, I want to play something else. Do you trade this one in? And the shop says, yeah, sure, I'll give you 20% off the next thing and I'll take your old game for it. Probably doesn't work that way. But Warships Blitz is an online game. It's an online multiplayer game. If tomorrow Wargaming decides to no longer run Warships Blitz and shut the servers down, then this game is gone. And if I was to buy a Roma today and tomorrow the game was gone, for whatever reason, I'm not saying it will be, but for whatever reason, then this feature is gone. I do no longer own this. I do no longer have access to it. It's not there anymore. And this isn't specific to World of Warships Blitz in any way, shape, or form. This is the same. Also, it's not specific to mobile in any shape or form. This is the same thing for all games that are dependent on a company running a server in order to actually make the game happen. So what is that then? What is a premium then? Well, in my understanding, it's a game feature that I pay money to unlock, and I can use that game feature for as long as the game's available. And if the game happens to be not available at any point in time, then the game feature is no longer available because, I can't log in anymore because it's not there. Now, let's switch over to Wargaming's definition of their understanding of what that is. This is a snippet from the North American End-User License Agreement. An End-User License Agreement is the thing that nobody ever reads, but clicks that they have done in order to start doing something with software. It's basically a legal document that you accept, and you have to accept in order to start using software. Again, this is nothing specific to World of Warships Blitz or Wargaming or anything else. In fact, I think this isn't even specific to World of Warships Blitz. This is just an end-user license agreement across most of the titles. Every other software has that. Microsoft Word or whatever you're using has an end-user license agreement where the company that sells you the software or gives you access to the software puts down the legal framework under which they do that. And here, again, I'm putting the disclaimer out here that this is my complete non-lawyery understanding of this thing. But they call this stuff additional features. Now, additional features, I think, is going to cover pretty much everything that you can pay money for to unlock. But again, I might be completely wrong here. So this is just once more my personal understanding. The first sentence here, and I've highlighted that for you, you agree that you do not own the additional feature. That was kind of my understanding as well before I looked into this. And that Wargaming has the absolute right to manage, regulate, control, modify, and or eliminate such additional features in its sole discretion in any general or specific case. And they have no liability to you based on its exercise of such a right. So effectively it means you pay money to unlock features in the game, but you don't own them, right? You have not purchased a thing. You have purchased access to a feature, which can be in its shape or form changed, removed, done with, whatever they see fit, and you can do jack about it. Now, this starts getting us into the next interesting area, which is why are people so upset? So let's have a quick look at the actual changes that have been made. The changes that are going to come out in update 6.2 are main gun reload down from 23 seconds to 28 seconds. That's a 5-second extra on the main guns. Well, is it important? Is it going to break the ship? Well, this ship was always going to be a secondary build ship that has extremely outrageous secondaries. The main guns reloading significantly slower is not a bad thing. Now, for my testing, the main guns weren't super punchy at range, but at close range, which you could play the ship very successfully on because it was relatively difficult to destroy with large caliber armor piercing, they could actually be relatively devastating as well, but the secondaries is where it's all in. The main gun dispersion, or the maximum dispersion, gains 10%. Note the maximum dispersion, not the minimum dispersion. So this doesn't mean that all dispersion is 10% worse. It means that the maximum ellipsis size of the dispersion is going to be 10% worse. So you get a less reliable dispersion. You can still get the exact same dispersion you had before the change, or before the nerf. Let's call it what it is. It's the maximum size. So it's kind of the sort of Kremlin situation where you can have good salvos, but you can also have really crap salvos. So that is actually a difference between this change and what the dispersion module does, which you wouldn't use because this is a secondary ship. But it would reduce both the minimum and the maximum dispersion, whereas here the nerf only touches the maximum dispersion. So it only makes it only makes it a little more likely that your dispersion is worse, but it doesn't guarantee that your dispersion is worse. The main gun armor piercing shell maximum penetration power has been reduced by 5%. What does that even mean? Armor piercing shells, if you're not aware of the mechanics, have a penetration power when they leave the barrel. That, I would say, is probably the maximum penetration power. As they fly, they lose penetration power. Once they hit the target, the remaining penetration power gets checked against the armor at the point of impact, and then it's decided if it's a bounce, if it's a semi-pen, it's a full pen, or if it's an over-pen, if you've got too much of it. So this reduces the amount of penetration that you have on the main guns. What is going to be the effect? We don't know yet, because it's pretty difficult to tell if this means she can no longer easily penetrate enemy ships at ranges where she would be active with her secondaries. We will have to see what that means. But effectively, these three together mean that the main guns are less powerful, because this is supposed to be a secondary ship. Which brings us to the fourth and probably most impactful change. Remember when I said that, yes, these are very powerful secondaries, and unfortunately this thing has tier 9 or 10 armor in tier 8, making it relatively impervious to enemy large caliber battleship shells. Well, the deck armor that I was complaining about, and note here that the average deck armor has been reduced, and they claim from 100mm to 76mm. Now, does this mean that there are multiple deck armor zones? I don't know. Or is it just generally the deck armor reduction? It could be that she had a very strong midships deck armor and a weaker forward and rear deck armor, and that the average out of these used to be 100 millimeters, which is now an average of 76 millimeters. We don't know, but it's almost a 25% reduction, and this starts making a lot more sense, which means she should be much more susceptible to enemy armor piercing shells, provided you know where to shoot. If you're plonking them into the belt armor, then, well, not an awful lot's going to be happening, but the deck armor is now where she's vulnerable. So more like a British battleship, really. And that puts her kind of in a more normal place in a Tier 8. And given that this is a World War I vintage battleship, I keep repeating that thing is actually old, this also makes me feel a little bit better about it. So, does this mean that the ship is now no longer overpowered? Well, it's still an extremely powerful ship. For people who are new to Tier 8 and are faced with one or more of those things, who damage control single fires, who don't know how to aim at, where to aim at battleships, they still struggle. This thing's going to be still a very powerful Tier 8 battleship. It's no longer going to be a game-breakingly powerful Tier 8 premium battleship. So all of this now brings us to the question of why did this happen, and why are people so annoyed about it? I think people are annoyed about it, from what I've read so far in comments and various posts, for two reasons. And the first reason is, I paid money for this, and I wanted to have something that's more powerful than what everybody else has, such that I can easily dominate the game without necessarily needing to have the skills to do so. So I can win every battle. This is a perception of a concept that's called pay to win. And this is something that you find in mobile games quite a bit. In fact, I've actually asked my son, who's 11 by now, about this, and said, if you were buying a thing, like a feature, a game pass, or anything that made you significantly more powerful than other players who have not purchased that thing, and then the owner of the game would do something about it, how would you feel about it? And he's like, yeah, I'd be angry, because I bought the thing because I wanted to have the thing that's more powerful than everything else. Warships Blitz generally doesn't work that way. I keep saying that it's 95% skill and 5% your wallet. Yes, you can obviously throw money at the problem. You can buy yourself, and there are still some very powerful premiums out there. There's the Seven Provincien, there's the Friesland, there's the Smolensk. There are various premium carriers that I've heard can do great things, but as you can see, if I touch them, nothing great happens. I've seen Atlânticos die with 20,000 damage done because they didn't know how to play the thing. Buying an Atlântico, even though it was overpowered, wasn't going to make you instantly win every single battle. You still needed to have some idea what you could do. So, in the right hands, it was an extremely powerful tool. It is now a powerful tool. It's still a very good battleship at Tier 8. So they're the people who say, well, I paid money to be overpowered, and now I'm no longer overpowered, and that sucks, and I want my money back. Then I think, well, I mean, that's sort of the understandable category. But I would say, as a response to that, I would say, look, balancing is a thing, and unbalancing the game is bad for the game, because you will not have anybody to play against anymore if you unbalance the game that way. The second and much more interesting question for me is, or reaction that came out of this was, I won't call it a conspiracy theory, because that term has been used, and in bad ways. But there's certainly the theory out there that, and I can see where people come from, because Wargaming does have, apparently, I haven't played their PC titles, but apparently there have been things happening that people were very unhappy about and that were not handled in the best way. So the theory that comes out of that is, I see what they did there. They are giving out overpowered premiums to make people buy them, and then they nerf them, and then they produce the next overpowered premium such that people buy them again. And I can see where the theory comes from. Is that how this worked or what's happening? Well, I don't have the actual insights because I don't work for wargaming. But I don't, from my perspective, from what I've seen and heard, this is definitely not how this is worked out. So let's have a quick look at what Wargaming has to say about the whole thing, because it's always good to hear both sides of the story. So what we've been told is that they weren't very happy about nerfing a premium ship. This is not something that should happen. Premium ships should come out in a balanced form. Now, the Atlântico very obviously wasn't balanced, and it has taken some consideration and some figuring out how to actually make these changes. Also probably due to various legislations and whatnots, I don't know. But that was quite a hassle for Wargaming as well to actually make these changes. They don't want to do that. They want to have premiums out there that are balanced, and they don't want to nerf them. Now, how did this happen? Probably I would say a lack of testing under realistic conditions, where once the ship was released, it very quickly became obvious that the ship was too powerful. But in test scenarios or running numbers or simulations, it wouldn't have really shown up. I don't know, but that's what I'm assuming here. So what again the statement was that there is no live server testing, and that allows changes to be made to ships before they get released under live server conditions. So the ship gets tested in real battles on live servers, and that feedback and data gets used to make adjustments to ships before they get released to avoid another situation of the same kind. Now, this tells me that, they really don't want to do this again because it's no fun. It causes a lot of bad PR, as you can see. And it's a hassle. I have heard, and I don't have an Atlântico myself, so I can't say if that's true. But I've heard that refunds or partial refunds or whatever has been offered, which again is I don't think something someone would do if they're planning to do this as a sketchy business model of bait and switch or pump and dump or however you want to call it. So my personal opinion here is that no, this actually really was a mistake. And was down to things being released without having them tested under live conditions, and that's being remedied. The Atlântico is still a good ship. It's not broken anymore. Hopefully, we'll have to try that. New players who are just coming up the grind, going up against Atlânticos, will still struggle. Because you do have to know what these things are capable of, but such is life with all ships, right? And personally, I think this is a good move. It's great that the ship gets changed because it was really not good for the game to be in the game in its shape or form. Now, all people who've been grinding 100,000 plus damage and witherer medals with these things, sorry, no. You don't own the ship. It's not your book. It's not your box of game installation discs. It's a feature, and the feature is subject to change. And that's good, because I don't want these things to be unchangeable, because then mistakes can never be remedied. And the game balance is what I personally care most about. So premium or non-premium, the game needs to be balanced to be fun for everybody, because if you end up having a pay-to-win scenario where somebody could just open their wallet and insta-win, and then that's no fun. And you'll run out of people to play against relatively quickly. So I think this is a good change. I think this was handled well. I think there's quite a bit of transparency here. Sly47 has pointed out that there's transparency about the values, as in a lot of these things could have been nerfed in a hidden way, and I agree with that. I think it's good to start pointing out these numbers and these mechanics and being transparent about it. So I think this is a good thing. And of course, you are free to disagree and vent your frustration and anger, or decide never to purchase anything anymore. But I hope giving you my personal perspective on this, and I have spent a significant amount of money on the game over the years, and that hasn't changed my opinion of how these things work. So there's that. And that's it for me today. And I think that was actually going on for way too long. So I wish you all a great week, and see you around next time. Bye-bye.